Hey guys, I'm so excited for you guys to see this video. It's something I've been working on for a really long time. I got to interview my best friend Aaliyah Bernacci in Vermont, and she told me a little bit about her story, and we talked a little bit about transracial adoption in general. So I'm super excited for you guys to see it. I hope you all enjoy it. So my name is Sydney Parkhurst. I am a transracial adoptee, and today I'm going to be interviewing my friend who is also a transracial adoptee. Her name is Aaliyah Bernacci. I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself and kind of explain, if you can, in like easy terms, because not a lot of people know what a transracial adoptee is. So if you can like explain what that is and what it kind of means to you.
Sure. So I'm Aaliyah Bernacci. I was adopted from Texas to a Mexican biological mother. My father is presumably African American. I was adopted from very, very young, and I was adopted to Caucasian adopted parents.
Yeah. So transracial adoption, she said, is kind of like when parents of one race adopt a child of a completely different race. You live in Barre, Vermont, which the demographic is less than 2% African American, which is kind of crazy. So what has it been like growing up as someone who is a person of color in a white family specifically?
Sure. So,
or with white parents?
It was obviously very hard because growing up, I think there's presumably as children, you like to look at your parents and sort of see where you came from and see, kind of like things you have in common. If you have the same nose, the same eyes, you're around the same height. And being of someone who is completely different race, I sort of look at my parents and there's still love there, but it's a different kind of love. And I seemingly always recognized that I was different. And that's really hard, especially, growing up and like growing into your preteens, which is already a tough enough time on young people, and then sort of trying to find my identity while simultaneously being part of such a blended family.
So you talked about your blended family. So kind of give us more about like who they are and like how your parents you're the oldest, right?
I am, yeah. So I'm one of 7 adopted kids in my family. And we kind of range all over the map. I have 1 sister and then 5 brothers. The age range, it kind of varies. I'm the oldest, I'm 24. My sister, she's 21. Next brother is 16, then 15, excuse me, and then 4, 2, and 1. My 2 of my brothers, they are from the same biological mother, but the rest were all from completely different families. In my family, there's myself, my sister, my oldest younger brother, and my 2-year-old brother. We're all African American. There's definitely a kind of camaraderie, I think, just because we kind of all look the same. We're gonna end up going through the same things together, and it's been nice to have people that you can kind of depend on that way and understand, where you're coming from, because obviously there are huge issues in race and like things like learning how to do your hair and like maybe trying to find like the right shade of makeup and stuff like that. Being able to connect on that has been incredible.
It's things that people, I think, who adopt people of color don't really think about. Like,
No.
For me, like hair was huge. I had no idea how to do it up until like a few years ago. And I think so. Kind of talk about like what it's been like growing up with like specifically like, your sister who has hair like you, and like what it's like kind of going through navigating how to do it and like learning did your mom have any effect on like you learning how to do it, or was it just you two?
My mom, bless her heart, she is an incredible parent, and she's done everything she possibly can, but I think things like hair are so important, and they signify a huge connection to specifically the African American community. I think hair is just a huge part of that. And she really tried. She really did. But I think there are things that she didn't necessarily understand that really affect the way that like young girls, especially African American girls, see their hair. Things like, you know, finding the right hair texture and hair porosity, and maybe realizing that like certain styles that work on Caucasian hair don't work on African American hair. And like certain different types of treatments, like chemical relaxers and stuff like that, what kind of long-lasting effects that has on your hair. And I think that we were navigating together, and we kind of worked together to see, you know, through trial and error, the kind of things that worked. And I think as we got older, my sister and I specifically, we made the conscious decision to try and teach ourselves. Just so you know, we wouldn't necessarily have to depend on others, because for a long time I was driving 6 hours one way just to get my hair done. And I kind of, at that point, after I'd done it, you know, maybe 4 or 5 times, I kind of realized that maybe it was time for me to just sort of literally take my hair into my own hands.
Right.
And get a good grasp on that.
And what were some of the things that helped you kind of do your hair?
Research, a ton of research. I depended so much on different types of articles and by word of mouth, maybe some of my other African American friends or friends who had the same kind of hair texture as me, and like learning what kind of products they used, what kind of treatments they used, things that they used to like help their hair grow, things like satin bonnets, satin pillows, and being able to talk to them and sort of see what kind of things they've tried, and really start from like the beginning, ground zero, and like trying to figure out, you know, like what kind of shampoo and conditioner were appropriate, and then leave-in conditioner, curling cream, and different types of protective styles. All those things I think were very, very hard to find, and a lot harder than I had initially anticipated, because there are so many different types of you know, salons in Vermont specifically that cater to the Caucasian head, versus being able to like walk into maybe a more diverse salon and ask someone there, you know, what kind of things are more appropriate for my hair. So
yeah, definitely. So growing up in Vermont, was it hard for you to kind of, as someone who's literally like almost 2% of the population, was it hard for you to kind of like go through school, and did you have any struggles kind of fitting in, or like obviously like I know a lot of adoptees have identity crisis, so how was that for you? Did you feel even more?
I mean, growing up it was hard because kids are mean. Like it was really difficult. I kind of knew and was able to understand that like I didn't, you know, when I was young, my mom would tell me, you know, you weren't carried in mommy's belly, like you were carried in someone else's belly, but you came to me and I love you so much. And it was hard. I specifically remember in like 3rd grade when other kids were sort of like catching on, like, hey, I've seen your mom a couple times and like she doesn't look anything like you. And having to explain, well, like, no, like, that's just because I'm adopted, but like, she's my mom. And obviously then you get into the conversation of like, but she's not your real mom. And that's a huge topic of conversation. And
why is that? Like, I think for adoptees, it's such a hard thing to talk about. And it's almost like, why don't you just understand? Like, why does it matter? Almost. It's a topic that adoptees kind of, it's like sensitive almost. And do you want to like talk about kind of how it's been, like how the questions kind of that you've gotten throughout your life?
Oh, sure. Okay. I think it's a really sensitive topic for me specifically. Obviously I can't speak for others, but I consider my adopted mom to be my real mom. I mean, she was there for the triumphs, failures, nightmares, changed every single one of my dirty diapers. And I think that family is made. It doesn't necessarily have to be blood. And through being able to, learn about other people's adoptions, I think it really solidified in me that, like, my mom is my mom, but other people might not understand that. And, like, being secure in what I know and what I feel, I kind of matured that way quickly from a very young age. I think a lot of the different questions that I got were really centered around my biological parents. And it was things like, do you look like your dad? Do you look like your mom? Where are they living now? Have you ever met them? Do you wish you could go back and be with them? And obviously those are sensitive. Like, a lot of those questions, like, and especially trying to navigate through them and, like, trying to decide, like, well, do I want to meet them? Like, right. Do I wish I would have been able to stay with them? And, like, I know I was so lucky in being able to learn about my adoption story, and, like, really hear that, like, I really genuinely didn't have it as bad as maybe some other people did. And it was really hard for me to try to decide whether or not, I did want to meet them or I didn't. And I think that as I got older, I really felt this strong desire to meet my biological parents because I just wanted to know, why. And I think that's kind of been a lingering question for quite a few adopted kids, is just, why did you decide to put me up for adoption? Like, what was going on at the time? And then you kind of, like, revert back to those feelings of abandonment. And I think meeting my biological mother for the first time was such an incredible experience. Like, I went with my adopted mom. She actually brought me. And I remember specifically when we landed in Fort Worth, the plane had just landed and I just bawled completely. I lost it. We didn't even exit the plane yet. The plane hadn't stopped moving and I was just crying and crying and crying because it's just something that I had thought about for years. And I was finally getting a chance to do it. And it was such an eye-opening experience being able to, like, see, in essence, what kind of life I would have had, what kind of people I would have had in my life had I had not been adopted. And I learned so much about my culture, and it's made me so proud to be who I am. And I feel so lucky to have two families that way.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of, like, cultural aspects, I think, that are taken from adoptees that are transracially adopted. I think, as you mentioned, I don't know if you said this, but Mexican too. You're half Mexican. How has that, like, played a factor in kind of you figuring out your identity and, like, kind of once you met your birth mom and kind of, like, saw your culture almost and how you would have grown up? What was that like for you? And, like, do you wish some part of you had that when you were growing up? / did you kind of know that you were, like, Mexican? So kind of talk about the cultural aspect.
So I think I kind of always knew that I was at least half Latino or Hispanic in some aspect. It was just something that my guardian ad litem had told my mom before I was given up for adoption, just a little bit of background. And she didn't know specifics. But when my adopted mom had told me that, I immediately started learning Spanish. Just because I was like, if one day I get the opportunity to meet them, I want to be able to communicate with everybody and really try to immerse myself and do it seamlessly like I had always been there. And it was incredible, and I got the opportunity to practice some of my Spanish when I was down there. But I think being down there and realizing how much they wanted to speak English instead of Spanish, it kind of made me look at the different aspects of being Mexican, that there was so much more than just learning the language. It was about family traditions, food, obviously, and the kind of things that like they find pride in. And I was able to sort of take that back with me, and I get to practice those things here in Vermont, even being, over 100 miles away from them.
Right.
So that was great.
Do you think that there is two sides to transracial adoption? Do you think there should be some people on one side saying that like transracial adoption shouldn't happen, and then someone on the other side saying that they should happen, and what's the right way to do it? Kind of like speak about what it's like to be the adoptee and not someone like adopting, and kind of being in that situation where they're not unsure about like whether they should adopt or transracial adopt, because there's a lot of people saying that they shouldn't, but at the same time there's also some people saying that they should. So what are some thoughts about that?
I think I understand where people come from when they're like transracial adoption can be detrimental to the kids, and it can be easier to adopt within your own race. But the reality of it is, at least in my humble opinion, kids need help. Like, they need a home. And I think regardless of their race or their culture or, what have you, it's important that kids go to loving homes. And not everyone is able to adopt. Not everyone has the money to be able to do so, or the resources to do so. And I think it's difficult to expect that, there are going to be enough, at least in my case, like African American parents who are willing and able and ready to adopt someone like me. My mom did it because she knows that kids need help. And I think that at the end of the day, it's important to just remember that, certain things can be learned, and I know certain things are inherent, and maybe to a certain extent it would have been different had I had African American or Mexican parents. But I think that I was sort of able to learn from a completely different perspective, and it's helped me learn and focus more on the character of a human being rather than just looking just at their skin tone.
Yeah, so a lot of people also talk about like the whole savior aspect. Do you want to give your thoughts on that? I know, like, for me personally, it is hard to use that word because I think a lot of people see it as a negative perspective, but also at the same time, like you said, there are kids that need to be adopted, and it's not like you're I guess you're kind of just like bringing them into a better life and into a good home. But also at the same time, I think people need to be aware that like culturally and socially, these kids need extra help.
Right.
So do you want to talk about like kind of like the saviorism aspect? And
Sure. That is actually something that I've heard about. I know, I don't know if anybody had seen you've seen the movie The Blind Side. And they talked about a lot how that kind of savior aspect, and like how they think that like, like these white parents are only adopting these kids to, really benefit themselves. And unfortunately, I do think those people exist. I think that's real. And it's something that everyone needs to be made aware of. However, I think it's wrong to assume that everyone goes in with that intention. I think that some people really do mean good out of it. They are really just doing it out of the kindness of their heart, and it affects the way that people look at adopting transracially moving forward. Like my mom, she had a really hard time just from the community when she first adopted me, because people kind of believed that she shouldn't have adopted someone that was African American. It would have been easier to adopt someone that was white, or she should have seen if there were any other white babies available, because she doesn't know anything about being African American. And as much as that is true, I think that I don't know how you could turn away someone in need. you know, and all of us just needed someone there to love us and care for us and be our parents.
Mm-hmm. So for parents who are thinking about transracially adopting, what is your advice to them to like kind of lessen the weight of the loss of like culture and identity?
Be patient. I think that it's going to take a lot of time and you guys are going to learn together. I think that it's important that, you know, you stay well read and you learn about the culture of the child that you're choosing to adopt and see if you can incorporate some of that, you know, in their life if they ask. Don't feel like you have to. But I think when they have questions, it's important to have those answers or have resources so that they can find the answers for themselves, because it's really hard growing up and not being able to find those answers anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it can sort of lead you down this rabbit hole and you spiral a little bit. And I think it'd be really important to learn those kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Anything at all? Or any advice? You already gave advice, but any like advice to adoptees specifically?
Again, be patient with yourselves. You're not as alone as you feel. There are so many people out there that are going through the exact same thing as you. And there's such a supportive community out there, and there are so many different types of resources for you. And it may not always feel like it gets better, but it does get easier.
Mm-hmm. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you all enjoyed it as much as I did filming. I haven't seen Aaliyah in so long, so it was so fun to go up to Vermont and reconnect with her and talk a little bit about transracial adoption. I hope that you guys subscribe if you can, and then also if you want to, leave a comment below, either about adoption, transracial adoption, my story, Aaliyah's story, anything you guys want. It'd be super fun to answer that, and yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you later.